next to a bunch of kids.
He then proceeds to detail Cody's general emotional instability during their reunion and says that Cody and Emma had only reached out to Mike after years of not contacting him because their child support finally ran out. Now, it's impossible to know how true any of this is, and to be totally honest, the details are less important than what this tells us about this family. Somehow, after years of not even being near each other, Jake and Cody are now once again fighting some surrogate war on behalf of their parents, with Jake taking his father's side. If it's true that Cody exposed himself in a public park, then he absolutely has issues. But then again, I have to wonder if his lack of boundaries and general social dysfunction has something to do with him being filmed against his will and mistreated on camera at such a young age. Whatever the case is, Jake's narrative began to completely disintegrate, as in late December 2025, he himself was arrested after being accused of assaulting someone during a neighborhood basketball game, which apparently put the other person in the hospital. The most recent video uploaded to Jake's channel, which is now privated, appeared to show a series of texts informing his audience of what happened and asking for money to help with his legal case. Clearly, there's no better way to prove that Mike had a terrible effect on his kids' lives than simply looking at how they're ending up. Even with the various claims they've made about each other, or Jake's current legal case, the fact that they see it as normal to air out family drama online for everyone to see is a clear sign of their development being stunted years ago. Mike Martin, meanwhile, still has a pretty active social media presence, using his TikTok account to promote his career making coworker music. As bad as Mike Martin and Daddy05 were, at their peak they had about 700,000 subscribers, a number that, while very big, pales in comparison to perhaps the most famous family on all of YouTube. When former college basketball player Austin McBroom and former model Catherine Pies began their relationship, they decided to start documenting their lives online, leading to the creation of the Ace Family channel in January of 2016. As the channel grew, it allowed their audience to look into moments as meaningful as the birth of their 3 kids. Ellie, Alea, and Steele McBroom. Due to how obscenely rich they became, this was basically YouTube's version of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, where people wanted to vicariously take part in this celebrity family and all of the drama that came with it.
All right, Ace family, it is currently 8:21 p.m. October 15th, and we just got out of the shower. I literally just put some clothes on. Catherine, as you can tell, she just got out of the shower. She just threw some clothes on. As soon as she threw some clothes on, she was having some serious contractions.
Their first bits of controversy are mostly insignificant, such as Austin playing one-on-one against Chris Brown, a man you might know for his hit songs like Look at Me Now and These Hoes Ain't Loyal, and for viciously beating Rihanna 15 years ago. The one other controversy was just people on Twitter digging up old tweets of Austin where he's saying mean things about black women. While both of these were considered newsworthy at the time, ultimately they did very little to put a dent in the Ace family's sterling reputation. But things got a little harder to justify in 2019, when Austin bought a lollipop in the shape of a man's private parts for a toddler he was caring for. Apparently, this kid wasn't one of his daughters, but instead a relative of his wife's.
Keep that in the bag forever. Do not show that to anybody, okay? That's your little secret. Guys, I'm in so much trouble. But she said she was gonna steal it if I didn't buy it, so better me buy it.
This really makes Austin seem extremely negligent, not just for buying it for this little kid, but also for taking her into a store that has that kind of merchandise in the first place. But instead of apologizing or even addressing the situation in any way, the Ace family just announced a temporary hiatus and came back later when they had signed with the Univision Creator Network. There were basically no long-term consequences for this controversy, but it did make people a bit more skeptical about the image Austin presented of himself as a well-meaning family man. This skepticism soon started focusing on the Ace family's charity events, and this is when things started to get a bit more serious. Basically, in his video announcing that they would be giving away $100,000, it was suggested that anyone who signed up had a chance to take part in the event and win.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Ace family is giving away $100,000. If you think you can do it, hit us up. If you think your favorite YouTuber or celebrity can do it, make sure you tag them. I also put the video on my Instagram, so make sure you tag them in the comments. Guys, it's a free 100K. You don't have to pay to enter.
But when the rubber met the road, it became clear that only other rich people and celebrities would be taking part, with names such as Jake Paul, Soulja Boy, Jacob Sartorius, and P. Diddy's son. As you can imagine, none of these people on the list are really going to benefit from $100,000, so it's really just something Austin was doing to get some clout online while pretending he was doing a giveaway. But it wasn't just his fans that he was basically finessing. Even other people who wanted to work with him weren't safe from this kind of shifty business. Case in point, a designer named Urban was initially contacted by Austin for some kind of collaboration, and things seemed to be going well, until he asked Austin if they could take a picture together. The mood instantly changed, and Austin refused to take the photo, saying he only took, quote, professional pictures. Of course, this was a lie. What really happened is Austin only led this guy on with the idea they'd be partnering up in some kind of business venture so that he could get his hands on enough of this guy's work to be able to plagiarize or reproduce it without giving him money or credit. Once he got what he wanted, he didn't want to take a picture because it would establish that he had met this guy, and thus he couldn't use the excuse that he had never heard of him or seen his stuff before. By the looks of it, Austin had actually done this to a bunch of other designers as well, which definitely put a dent in his ability to do business. Another incident that was heavily scrutinized was the Ace family supposedly being victim to a home invasion in August of 2018. On the surface, it seems ridiculous to criticize someone for being the victim of a crime, but many began to speculate that this crime had never actually happened at all.
So do we have your permission to take the knife to get fingerprints off of it?
Yeah, of course.
Do we have permission to take the knife for to take fingerprints off of it? Does that sound like a quote from any police officer? Or does that sound like an actor who's trying to be like a police officer? There's just something off about it.
This particular situation is a bit odd because a real police report was eventually shared, so it's pretty unlikely that this was completely faked, which led some to theorize that although the break-in was real, they staged the aftermath to make a video out of it. Regardless of what the case is here, no matter how bad it was looking for Austin up until this point, it paled in comparison to his situation following October of 2019. Seemingly out of nowhere, a beauty vlogger named Cole Kerrigan made a video about Austin. The first claim he makes was that Austin had been unfaithful to his wife, which, while bad, is not criminal. But the next claim was that Austin, his father, and multiple other men had assaulted a woman in her hotel room.
It was kind of weird that Catherine wasn't at Austin's birthday party. I thought it was weird that I saw him out at clubs multiple times without Catherine. That's none of my business, whatever. Not that big of a deal. So a few months ago, June 22nd to be exact, I was still living in the Team 10 house and I got a call from one of my good friends. She was hysterically crying. I've never heard anyone feel so distraught in my life. I was so scared, and she began to explain to me that she was in Miami with Austin McBroom and a bunch of other people, including his assistant, his dad, security guards, other girls. XYZ happened. I'll get into that. After they all had been drinking, my two friends went back to their room to go change because the sun was setting. And that's when Austin, the security guard, the father, and two other guys came into their room. Obviously, I don't have recordings that went down in the room, but my friend told me that she repeatedly said no multiple times, over and over and over, to the point where she started crying, begging them to stop. That's when they forced themselves in her, and I will insert the photos of the blood all over the bed sheets in the hotel room right here on the exact same date, June 22nd. Now, after this had happened to them, obviously they're traumatized, so they hide out in their room for hours. This screenshot is going to be one of Austin McBroom's friends texting them 3 times within a 3-hour period on June 22nd, right after they raped her.
While the rumors of infidelity he echoes in the beginning here had already been swirling around for quite a while, it obviously pales in comparison to the accusation that Austin and multiple other men were guilty of a serious sex crime. Besides this, there were claims that Austin had multiple kids by multiple different women whom he refused to accept responsibility for, and there was a claim that he made most of his partners, consensual or otherwise, sign non-disclosure agreements and threatened them with lawsuits if they ever spoke out. Cole even adds that he spoke to Keemstar, who said he was going to report on this stuff, but ultimately it never happened because Austin supposedly paid Keem $500,000 to keep quiet. Keemstar publicly tweeted out a reply to these claims, complaining that his phone number was leaked and saying that the $500,000 thing was a joke Cole had taken out of context. I'll say right now that $500,000 is insane, and there's absolutely no way Austin paid Keemstar of all people that much money to not talk about this stuff. Eventually, one of the girls who Cole was speaking about decided to clarify things Cole apparently got wrong. In an Instagram post where she identified herself, Leslie Golden said, "To speak on this video that Cole Kerrigan posted, some of you have already figured out that I'm the other girl they're talking about in the video. I feel like this video was made for the wrong reasons, and this wasn't Cole's story to tell. Cole even texted me saying we could potentially get paid $100,000 from this, following the claim that Drama Alert was paid off $500K. I wasn't aware Amanda or Cole were in contact with Drama Alert to anonymously run our story, but I was aware Cole's video was being made, and I only wanted it to be factual if it was ever going to be posted. I wanted to say that Austin McBroom is not to blame in this situation and did not me or anyone. This is not what I wanted. There's several sides to every story, and this isn't how I wanted to tell mine." Once again, this was met with speculation that Leslie too was being paid to not talk about whatever happened, but clearly at this point, this was reaching a point of baseless rumors and conspiracy theories. Thanks to Leslie sharing text messages that showed Cole apparently planning to use a version of her story to get $100,000, Keemstar was vindicated, but the story was still without a proper resolution. Eventually, Catherine herself started tweeting about it and making fun of all the claims and suggesting that they're all fake. The only thing is, there was still a lingering accusation that one of Austin's good friends had viciously assaulted someone, and Austin's response seemed to implicitly admit to being unfaithful to his wife. This was pretty much confirmed in a video that came out later of Austin with another woman at some club. But again, there was absolutely no evidence that he had ever assaulted anyone or had children with other women. After Austin announced that he'd be taking legal action against the people slandering him, Cole's video was ultimately taken down. His mishandling of this story almost single-handedly buried the potential to expose Austin. But as the whole commotion died down, the people who were adamant about Austin's misdeeds continued to gather evidence. Unfortunately for Ace Family fans, it seems this close brush with career-ending controversies wasn't enough to get Austin and his wife to be more careful about their conduct, and as early as 2021, they were already back in the headlines, this time for very different reasons. Catherine had a contract with a cosmetics company called TBL, where she would be its public face and promote the brand while they handled the back end. But allegedly on March 10th of 2021, she logged into the company's accounts and changed all of their passwords in what is described as an attempted coup, followed by threats to dissolve it and appropriate all of its assets if the company didn't give her what she wanted. This is an insane financial maneuver, and it was serious enough that the company actually sued her for it. And this was taking place around the same time that the Ace Family channel was starting to experience a serious dip in viewership. Austin, meanwhile, was trying his hand at influencer boxing, which led many to speculate that Catherine's actions were some desperate attempt to make some money to maintain their luxurious lifestyle. Ultimately, this boxing match was also an attempt to capitalize on the influencer boxing trend of the time, and they definitely were expecting to make some serious cash from it. But what many didn't realize is that Austin was not just a fighter. He was a part of the production, setting up the entire thing. Well, shortly after Austin fought Bryce Hall, a legal battle broke out as multiple parties were alleging they hadn't been paid what they were promised by Austin. Reason being that the fight's viewership drastically underperformed and didn't make any money. Just a few months later, Austin was handed a $200,000 fine for doing an impromptu fan meetup that ended up blocking the streets of Beverly Hills for hours. The same month that this went down, the McBroom's $10 million mansion was foreclosed, basically confirming two possibilities. One, that they were rapidly running out of money, or two, they just weren't making any. While this should have been a sign for them to take a step back, regroup, and focus on long-term financial planning, instead, they continued to make rash decisions with their deteriorating brand. In 2022, they decided to slow down their content creation efforts to host an Ace Family Festival, which they were going to charge $300 per ticket for. I don't know what kind of low-watt NPC you'd have to be to even consider going to an Ace Family Festival at a $300 price point, but clearly the family was desperate enough to try anything at this point. The most scammy looking part of this was that they were selling the tickets before they even had a location or precise date. And on top of that, they even sold a VIP gold ticket for $500, which also granted you access to Austin's next boxing match, which also hadn't even been booked. To no one's surprise, the Ace Family Festival was a complete catastrophe, with extremely long lines of people under extreme heat, tents breaking down, and ridiculously expensive food. The whole thing was documented by commentary YouTuber Atozi, where even among the many issues, you can see how empty it was.
I'd probably say maybe 300 or 400 people are here.
While the public doesn't have access to the financial details, given the lack of attendance, it's very unlikely that it came close to breaking even. It seemed like the Ace family had intended this festival as their exit plan from YouTube. One final swing at squeezing some money out of their audience before they disappeared. But by the time they put it on, their reputation was already in the gutter, and no one cared to even show up. In mid-2023, they tested the waters to see if a return to form was possible, and while the video did get millions of views, they wouldn't upload again in the immediate aftermath, with no explanation given. Ultimately, it seems the answer may have been relationship troubles, as in January of the following year, they came forward to announce that they were getting a divorce. As happy as many were that the Ace family was finally coming to an end, it wasn't the satisfying crash out they were looking for, with Catherine and the kids drifting steadily out of the spotlight, and Austin only occasionally showing his face to try and run get-rich-quick schemes. This story looked to be dead and buried. But in November of 2024, it was suddenly revived by the announcement that Catherine was now with someone else. With the media excited at the prospect of more Ace family drama, people waited with bated breath for a response from Austin, and they did get one, although not in the way they expected. Within a week or so of this announcement, Austin McBroom had a lawsuit filed against him for allegedly recording a loud and disruptive skit that exposed a woman's address. Apparently, these videos were posted to his Snapchat and caused this woman to be harassed by strangers as if she was somehow connected to Austin, when in actuality, he just picked a random person's house to do a sketch wherein he pretended to be getting kicked out and having his belongings all scattered on the front lawn. The driving factor behind the lawsuit is that the harassment this woman received required her to temporarily move out and pay double rent for a month, all thanks to Austin's antics. He and Catherine's name popping up in news outlets led to a resurgence in attention, and sharks from their past began circling as they smelled blood.
Ooh, that's good.
Case in point, Cole Kerrigan came back to revisit his controversy after having been completely silent about it for years.
You guys remember this little video? That's me, and real ones will know when that video was posted. Austin and his team posted a statement calling me a liar, and to this day I get called a liar when it comes to accusations because I outed him and his dad for my friend at the time. But I just want to say, after that happened, Austin hand delivered me $40,000 cash just to not say anything after his team posted that and to delete my video. Here's some proof, but if y'all want a more in-depth story time, let me know.
Cole once again comes across as an extremely unreliable narrator for a few reasons. He says he got $40,000 in cash from Austin, but as Leslie showed in the text messages that she posted, money was always Cole's objective from the start, even if he had to use other people's supposed victimhood to do it. At the same time, Cole's evidence that he was paid by Austin is just a picture of him holding money. There is no proof Austin gave him this money. Then again, Cole claims Austin also got to Leslie to keep her quiet, so it's honestly impossible to be certain of what the truth is here, given how much misinfo is being thrown back and forth. But I think in regards to this specific situation, unless some more compelling proof comes out showing Austin is guilty or has paid people off, he's probably innocent. Ultimately, this topic coming back didn't really pan out to any actual charges being pressed, and due to how irrelevant Austin and the Ace family were at this point, it barely mattered anymore. In May of 2025, Catherine took part in an episode of the Call Her Daddy podcast. This name is so cooked, man. To talk about everything going on in her life. She says a lot of stuff about how their financial situation fell apart and how Austin wasn't faithful, but it's worth remembering that she stuck with this guy for years and was more of an accomplice than a victim, so it's hard not to take it with a grain of salt when she suggests that Austin was the one who brought the problems around. Finally, on Christmas Day 2025, the Ace family uploaded another new video at last. Catherine is nowhere to be seen, and instead, it's just Austin and the kids. It's hard to know know what's going on behind the scenes with these people. Maybe Catherine wants to come back to this channel, maybe just Austin does, maybe they're running out of money again. We simply can't know it all. And in some ways, the public isn't owed an explanation anyway, because we don't know these people. There's no denying that the Ace family had a meteoric rise and fall, and in a way, they're different from the other channels I've talked about today, because Austin and Catherine never outright hurt their kids, outside of the obvious paradigm of family vlogging being generally unethical. Ultimately, there are a lot of questions still unanswered about their time on YouTube as a whole, but given everything I've shown today, maybe some questions are better left unanswered. It's also for the best that the last family we're talking about is no longer allowed to operate on YouTube, although, fair warning, this is easily the most horrific out of all of them. Unlike everyone else on this list, Michelle Hackney Hobson's 7 children, ages ranging from 3 to 15, were all adopted. Due to the unusual nature of her household, her channel got a lot of attention during its run from 2012 to 2019, reaching over 350 million views and over 800,000 subscribers. But as early as 2017, the public was aware of a few huge red flags, signaling that something much darker was afoot behind the scenes. For reasons unknown, one of her children was seen running through the neighborhood without clothes on, which was reported to the police, who then forwarded the issue to the Department of Child Safety. As it turns out, Michelle had complaints levied against her since before the creation of her YouTube channel. As far back as 2011, the first complaint claimed that Michelle would lock her foster kids in a room where they yelled and cried helplessly, and she refused to let them out. Following this first complaint, there were a number of accusations made over the next few years. One claim suggested that she forced one of her kids to stand in a corner for prolonged periods of time as punishment while she went to bed. Another claim was that she had her kids wearing ripped shoes that were 3 sizes too small. On January 31st of 2014, one of her kids ended up hospitalized in a mental ward after an incident at school, although we don't exactly know what went down. Later that year, another claim was made against Michelle to DCS. They claimed she didn't clean her kids, which led them to have feces on their skin, causing abrasions and infections. In 2015, someone alleged that she had thrown a can at one of her kids' heads, leaving a scar. In June that same year, it was claimed she gave one of them a black eye, several bruises, skin rashes, and that they were showing signs of starvation. In 2017, another claim was made, this one even more serious. They said that Michelle was locking children in a closet for 90% of the day, withholding food from them, and spraying them with mace as a form of punishment. With the sheer volume of claims being made against her over the years, you would think that a serious investigation would have taken place. Despite visiting Michelle's home a total of 9 times, they never managed to get anything definitive on her, and as a result, she was allowed to continue running her channel with no issues. For several years, Michelle flew right under the radar, completely unfettered, making videos prominently featuring the children she was actively hurting. The suffering wouldn't end until March of 2019, when one of Michelle's biological children, Megan Hobson, decided to step in, and the police were called to perform a welfare check. What they found wasn't just confirmation that all of the complaints to DCS were real, but in actuality, it was much worse. As reported by the Maricopa City Police Department, the children, one of which was 3 years old, looked malnourished with dark rings under their eyes and pale complexions, substantiating the claim that she kept them inside and didn't allow them to have regular sleep or sun exposure. One of the daughters immediately offered up information to the police, saying that she was kept in a closet for days at a time with no food or water, pepper sprayed, forced to have ice baths, and that her head had been forced underwater for periods of time as punishment. And unfortunately, the harm that Michelle dished out didn't limit itself to being physical. Instead, it was also sexual. A lot of the suffering she inflicted was apparently motivated, or at least directly related to, the kids not performing in the videos exactly how Michelle wanted them to. It is deeply disturbing that all of this was going on while she uploaded almost weekly to YouTube, parading her victims around and blatantly profiting off of their pain on the regular. And surprisingly, it gets even darker. 2 of her sons were in on it, so to speak. Logan and Ryan Hackney were not adopted, and they were promptly charged with failing to report the crimes taking place inside the house once it became clear that there was no way they weren't aware of what was going on. For whatever legal technicality, these 2 had their charges dismissed. But as it turns out, years later, both of them were once again charged with felony sexual misconduct with minors. Although it's unclear if these charges are related to their foster siblings or if they're about unrelated crimes. One piece of information that is available is that one of them, Logan, is alleged to have been in contact with 2 minors under the age of 15 between the years of 2008 and 2013, while the other one, Ryan, was in contact with one between 2011 and 2012. If these victims are indeed their siblings, it adds another degree of perversion and evil unbelievable to this whole story. Michelle, meanwhile, didn't end up serving her full sentence, as she died in November of 2019 at the age of 48.
And tonight, the prosecutor leading the case against Hobson says her death is actually a good thing.
On the surface, family vlogging channels present a glimpse into someone else's world. What could be more wholesome than smiling families opening presents and having fun? It's all the more disturbing then when the curtain is peeled back and some of them turn out to be more cruel than any viewer would have ever imagined. But for me, it's not just the bad apples. The entire genre is essentially predicated on robbing kids of their youth and blasting it out to the world for everyone to see their every moment. Have we not learned from how developmentally stunted many child actors turn out to be? I guess the answer is no, we haven't learned. And everything I've talked about in this video will probably be repeated again. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.
Welcome to the Wavy Web Surf Expeditionary Base Camp. Today we're in the jungle going on a bit of a safari, an exploration of when the rule of law and the animal kingdom collide. On occasion throughout history, people have tried to apply the laws and morality of man to animals. And the times we've tried it, it typically hasn't gone well for the animal in question. You've got everything from cannibal monkeys receiving life sentences after going on alcoholic rampages to demonic roosters being sentenced to burn at the stake by medieval juries. And of course, how could we forget when a town participated in lynching a 4,000-pound Asian elephant by use of crane for the crime of murder? Yes, I know, pretty dark stuff, but it's not all grim. Some intermingling of law and order and animals have yielded less macabre results. Endangered monkey sues man over viral selfie photo. One of the most infamous court cases involving an animal in modern history is rather fittingly a copyright dispute, and it was filed by this monkey named Naruto. Okay, well, he didn't technically file it himself, PETA did for him. Naruto's monkey selfie is one you've all likely seen on the internet, but who actually owns the image? The monkey took the picture, but copyright doesn't apply to animals, right? Let's get into it. This is British photographer David Slater. Beginning in 2008, this guy started going on trips down to India, specifically the Celebes crested macaques. By virtue of these monkeys being rare and remotely located, they're timid and difficult to photograph. So it takes David years to build up the rapport with these little rascals until he finally lands the photo to end all photos. On a trip in 2011, David set up his tripod where the monkeys typically hung out. Typically, the monkeys got nervous and ran off if he started, actively aiming cameras at them. So the idea here was that maybe if he acted natural and passed their vibe check, perhaps the macaques would just start playing with the camera and maybe take their own picture. So David just let the macaques have their way with him for a bit. Some of them start looking into the camera lens and playing with the buttons, and one of the monkeys, which would later be given the name Naruto, manages to trigger the camera's shutter and take some pretty incredible up-close self-portraits, almost as if it was taking selfies. This one in particular being quite remarkable. Upon reviewing the photography later, David was stunned. He'd never seen anything like it. The man quickly took his monkey selfie to the British media in an effort to showcase the piece to the world. In July of 2011, The Telegraph and The Guardian would be some of the first to publish the monkey selfie image. And when people got their eyes on it, they were in complete awe. It's really one of those photos that makes you feel a lot closer to animals than you did before seeing it. The photo goes viral, but problems quickly arise. A false narrative gets associated with the picture, one that claimed David Slater had simply left his camera in the jungle and Naruto stumbled across it, picked it up, and snapped the picture himself. Others made claims that the monkey stole the photographer's camera and then took the photo. While fun to imagine, these claims are patently false, as in all reality, David had spent years building up trust and learning the quirks of this monkey species to even photograph them in the first place. He was physically present and near his camera when Naruto snapped the picture. He also beforehand set up the camera mode and lens in a configuration to where, let's just say, a monkey could use it and snap a passable photo easily. David did his best to correct the record on this misinformation, but unfortunately for him, thanks to the internet, the rumor would become the prevailing narrative behind the monkey selfie, and this soon led people to question if David actually held copyrights over it. Enter David Slater's first op.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
On July 9th, 2011, an editor for Wikipedia would upload the Slater monkey photos to the Wikipedia website. But in their upload, this editor did not provide any licensing information or any credit to David Slater. Rather, a note was added stating, quote, "This file is in the public domain because as the work of a non-human animal, it has no human author in whom copyright is vested," unquote. Wikipedia, for better or worse, is one of the largest arbiters of truth online. And so naturally, you can imagine Slater got pretty pissed when he saw some nerds at Wikipedia arbitrarily deciding he had no rights to the monkey selfie he was indirectly responsible for. A back and forth would ensue between Slater and Wikipedia, with the photographer demanding that the platform remove the monkey selfie if they weren't going to license it or credit him. And Wikipedia's response was essentially, "It's not your photo, lil bro." Quote, "We received a takedown request from the photographer claiming that he owned the copyright to the photographs. We didn't agree, so we denied the request." I think many of you are intuitively probably picking up on what's going on here, but Wikipedia is arguing that because the monkey quote unquote took the photo and copyright only applies to human beings, no human being actually owned it. Therefore, it was public domain. I find it rather interesting that Wikipedia took it upon themselves to be judge, jury, and executioner here, as even if Slater didn't technically snap the photo, he did very much facilitate its creation. It would almost certainly not exist without his involvement, but I digress. This case is controversial for a reason. This move from Wikipedia created a domino effect, and websites across the internet started using the monkey selfie photo without paying licensing fees to David Slater. Because, well, Wikipedia said it was public domain, so fuck it, it's a free-for-all, right? Slater's licensing management would attempt takedown requests, but they were mostly ignored. All of these articles and publications took the "it's public domain, so it's free to use" angle. David is a photographer and made a living off of licensing fees from his image. This perceived theft was obviously a huge blow to him. The guy expected the monkey selfie to be his meal ticket, but found it stolen right from under him. The only recourse that he had at the time was to sue people, but lawyers are expensive and the man was by no stretch wealthy. So this wasn't really an option for him at the time. He reflects on feeling swindled out of the selfie. Quote, "I made £2,000 for that picture in the first year after it was taken. After it went on Wikipedia, all interest in buying it went. It's hard to put a figure on it, but I reckon I've lost £10,000 or more in income. It's killing my business." Things would continue to get worse for David, as later in 2014, the US Copyright Office published an opinion explicitly stating that, quote, "A photograph taken by a monkey," unquote, is an example of something that cannot be copyrighted. Even the United States overlords of copyright disagreed with him. Just a few weeks before this, the Wikipedia folks that started this whole kerfuffle had been having a bit of fun at Wikimania 2014, with Wikipedia co-founder Jimmy Wales taking selfies with printed copies of the Naruto selfie photograph. It's almost as if the guy knew about the US Copyright Office's opinion in advance. Despite the soy jack-worthy smug selfie from Jimmy Wales, David remained adamant that the photos were his property. Many copyright lawyers would also speak out around this time in agreement with him. But just as a monicum of sympathy for David's plight began to manifest, PETA would swoop in to clip the wings of any legal effort David may have been preparing to mount, and they would proceed to bird shit out their own case against him. PETA, and to clarify, I'm not talking about the Family Guy, we're referring to the animal rights group, they entered the fray in 2015 just as Slater had announced he was releasing a book titled Wildlife Personalities. The marquee photo in this book was none other than the beloved monkey selfie of Naruto. PETA believed that not only did David not have the rights to this image, they believed that the monkey should have copyright over it and that David was essentially stealing from the monkey. On September 22, 2015, PETA filed a lawsuit against both Slater and his book's publishing company in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. In their suit, PETA had given the monkey a name, which you already know is Naruto. PETA argued that Naruto should not only be assigned as the copyright holder of his photo, but that PETA should have exclusive rights to the proceeds of the photos so that they could deliver this money to Naruto and the other crested macaques for their own benefit. You could say that they were taking the monkey's case pro bonobo. During the early stages of Slater's lawsuit, Slater's publisher's strongest defense was that copyright law didn't extend to animals, which ironically was an argument once used by Wikipedia to justify that the photo should be public domain because they believe since a monkey took it, nobody owned it. For the first time in this story, David Slater would catch a break, a rather small one at that. In January of 2016, in a provisional ruling, U.S. District Judge William Orrick agreed with the defense's argument, saying, quote, Congress and the president can extend the protection of law to animals as well as humans, but there is no indication that they did so in the Copyright Act, and the case was dismissed on January 28th. Essentially, the court emphasized that, yeah, there are laws that protect animals, but copyright isn't one of them. So despite what you may have read on the internet, no, Naruto the monkey does not own the selfie photo, and PETA is getting no money from it. But frustratingly for Slater, his claim to the copyright wasn't clarified much in this case. While he did indeed set up the environment for the picture to be taken, the monkey was the one that posed and snapped the photo. Therefore, technically, the animal took it, and while I'm not saying it 100% for certain is, the implication here is that the monkey photo is in the public domain. PETA would eventually appeal this decision, but it ended in a settlement between themselves and David. This settlement involved David promising to pledge 25% of future profits made from the monkey photos to groups that would work to protect the crested macaques. And that was that. If you're asking my non-legal opinion, I do sympathize with Slater a bit, and it is very frustrating that the court left so much ambiguity in regard to who was the copyright owner of this photo. As I've stated previously, it doesn't exist without him. I think there is a universe where Slater was a much richer man and could pay lawyers to pursue costly lawsuits. And in this universe, I think he might have had a chance of getting an explicit statement from the court underscoring his rights to the monkey photos. But when it comes to civil matters, the level of justice received often will extend only to how deep your wallet is at the time. Now, David, of course, still can use the images commercially, and as far as I know, he still asserts himself as the author of them. The big takeaway, though, is that Naruto doesn't own them. Interestingly, this case has provided some rather useful insight in the context of AI-generated content. Naruto vs. Slater has become a touchstone case in regard to the question of does AI own the work it creates, at least under US law. If you're going off the precedent set by the monkey, no, it doesn't. Only humans can create copyrighted works as the law stands. So no, you're not going to be seeing AI chatbots filing copyright lawsuits anytime soon. And I hope to God it never gets there, because if that's the case, what plays out in the Animatrix isn't probably too far off. The Basel Rooster Trial. Okay, now if you're looking for a historical example of an animal being made to formally stand trial in the court of law, look no further than the medieval rooster that was burned at the stake for its heinous crimes against God. When observing the architecture in the city of Basel, Switzerland, tourists can find a curious amount of eerie-looking statues depicting basilisks and cockatrices, which, unbeknownst to me before writing this video, are effectively the same mythical creature. Basilisks are usually depicted as more serpent-like and cockatrices are more cock-like, but both of them are deadly venomous reptile-chicken hybrids that can kill or turn their enemies to stone simply with their gaze. Statues of these things can be found everywhere around Basel. An important grimoire note about these creatures that's key to this story: both basilisk and cockatrices are born from an egg laid by a rooster. Which, if you didn't know, roosters don't lay eggs normally. A rooster's egg, if discovered, was said to have been a bad omen. Locals at the time claimed sorcerers and apparently Satan himself employed witches to hatch such rooster eggs in an effort to form a basilisk army that would do the devil's bidding and kill people. Basel, Switzerland in the medieval times had much superstition regarding the legend of the basilisk. Farmers and townsfolk were always on the lookout for any potential corrupted egg-laying roosters about. And in the year 1474 in Basel, they found one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, get your seasonings ready because a chicken is about to get burnt on a cross. According to legend, a local rooster had laid an egg, and once discovered, Basel citizens were mortified. News spread about the alleged demonic egg-laying cock, and before long, a full-blown hysteria had taken over the populace. Medieval YouTubers were pumping out slop videos covering the drama, with titles like "The demonic rooster situation is insane" and "The Basel rooster just ended his career." It was a real calamity. So the egg-laying rooster was brought to the magistrate's court and accused of consorting with the devil, a penalty punishable by death. But not so fast. He'd have a chance to fight for his life in court. Sort of. In medieval times, animal trials were not all too uncommon, but rarely was there ever real justice for the animals involved. In all reality, most of the historical animal trials you'll read about in books and online are nothing more than kangaroo court cases fueled by some sort of religious panic. They often involve the animals accused of being possessed by the devil or something like that, and well, they tend to just find the thing guilty and kill it to appease panicked townsfolk and rally people together around the centralizing force of religion. But hey, maybe this rooster could beat the case and become the O.J. Simpson of satanic animals. So how exactly does a rooster stand trial? The little guy can't even speak up for himself to defend himself in front of a judge or jury. Well, fear not, the magistrate's court appointed it a public defender. You might be surprised to find that both the defense and prosecution in this case actually locked in and submitted actual argumentation in regard to the rooster's alleged satanic partnership. It wasn't just some phoned-in bullshit, they actually tried somewhat. According to a chronicling of the event, the rooster's public defender argued that, quote, no evil animus had been proved against his client and that no injury to man or beast had resulted. The laying of the egg was an involuntary act and as such not punishable by law. If it was intended to impute the crime of sorcery to his client, he was entitled to an acquittal, for there was no instance on record of Satan having made a compact with one of the brute creation. Essentially, the defender argued that the egg laying from the rooster was an innocuous glitch of nature, and that because no harm had come of it, nor had any person witnessed the rooster interacting with demonic forces, the cock should be acquitted. Unsurprisingly, the prosecutor made the wise decision to appeal to the religious anxieties of the people, effectively arguing that the rooster was subject to a demonic possession, and therefore was technically consulting with Satan in a roundabout way. A law article from W.W. Hyde called "The Prosecution and Punishment of Animals and Lifeless Things" explains the angle from the prosecution. It was not a case of the devil making a compact with brutes, but that Satan actually entered into them on occasions. And he adducted the case of the Gadarene swine and the fact that these animals, through involuntary agents like the cock, had been punished. The prosecutor argued that although the animal didn't have actual intent of being evil, he was still tainted by Satan's demonic essence entering and causing the egg laying, and thus it should be destroyed to prevent any corruption in the future and possible basilisk and cockatrices being born. The Gadarene swine case mentioned by the prosecutor is a reference to the story in the New Testament of the Bible. I'm not a theologian or anything, so bear with me, but it's a story where Jesus confronts the spirit of a demon who is possessing a man. Upon being confronted by Jesus, the spirit begs for mercy and requests to be allowed to transfer into the bodies of some nearby pigs, promising not to cause any problems. Instead of destroying the evil spirit, Jesus allows the request, but then the evil spirit immediately upon possessing the pig creates a stampede that leads all of the other pigs to falling off of a cliff and into a lake where they all drown. The story is meant to highlight the inherently evil nature of demonic spirits. Even when Jesus allowed the spirit a way out, it immediately went on to possess and kill a herd of pigs moments later out of spite. And the prosecutor argued this rooster was a similar example of what could happen to the Gadarene swine in the Bible. While it may be an innocent creature, if possessed by a reckless demon, the chicken's nature is essentially overruled and could be used as a vessel by demonic forces to cause chaos, so it must be dealt with. In the end, the poor rooster was deemed guilty for the crime of cockatrice egg-laying and consorting with the devil and was sentenced to death. Burnt at the stake as a heretic alongside its eggs, in a ceremony held in the public town square. They had it smelling like a Popeye's chicken up in that hoe. While it's unlikely that the chicken's egg contained any such cockatrice, one question remains. Why did this rooster lay eggs? The Basel rooster trial is rather infamous and has been studied for centuries. And with advancements in science and biology, people have submitted some convincing theories. Theories that have only added to the already ridiculous nature of this chicken torching incident. The most interesting theory, in my opinion, well, it's possible that the rooster wasn't a rooster at all, but a female chicken that developed male plumage due to a tumor or something that caused elevated levels of testosterone. A hen with such a condition would look similar to a rooster, but could still lay eggs. Right now, we have some images of hens popping up on screen that have gone under such a testosterone transformation. These are female chickens. So you could imagine if this was the case, then yeah, it would look like a rooster laid an egg. An equally likely theory as to how the rooster had an egg, well, it could have just been framed. It could be possible that someone simply had it out for the owner of the rooster and wanted to cause drama for them, so they just put an egg under it. Or perhaps someone from the church did this to stir up religious fervor. Whatever the case, I include the Basel rooster because it's in the cohort of truly absurd historical cases where they deadass had animals show up to courtrooms with actual judges and juries sentencing them to some sort of bizarre punishment. Shit like that just does not happen in the modern age. There I was, at the doorstep delivering the customers food, and out of nowhere, I was assaulted. Pushed to the ground like a rag doll because they're chicken. Causing a totally few consent is a good reason you they're living of chicken. Next, we discuss a truly unusual case of capital punishment enacted on an animal during times of war. A public hanging of a monkey accused of being a French spy. Though some historians claim it might have not even been a monkey at all, it might have been a captured child. The Hartlepool monkey hanging. Welcome to Hartlepool, a northern English port town with almost 100,000 residents. It's a beautiful coastal town, but not all too unlike the others you find in this part of England. Though something absolutely unique about this place and its people comes in the form of a nickname ascribed to its citizens by others around the country. The people of Hartlepool are often referred to as the monkey hangers. Why exactly? Well, unfortunately, it has nothing to do with their climbing expertise. According to legend, back during the Napoleonic Wars off the coast of Hartlepool, a French ship became shipwrecked and was spotted sinking by the Hartlepool locals. A French ship this far north was pretty unusual and was a first of its kind encounter for the people of the town. After the thing had fully sank, the Hartlepoolians hastily rushed to the beach where wreckage washed up in the hopes of finding treasure or potential surviving enemy soldiers who they could, interrogate and ask why the French were up here. Among the wreckage, the townsfolk found only one survivor. It was the ship's apparent pet monkey. A monkey that was purportedly dressed in its own miniature French military-style uniform. He was the vessel's mascot and was likely a source of amusement for the now drowned soldiers. So this little mini monkey Napoleon is the only survivor here. For us, it sounds like a pretty amusing find. But this was genuinely unnerving to the Hartlepoolians. Keep in mind Hartlepool is located on the far northeastern side of England. Hell, it's closer to Scotland than it is to London, not to mention France. So these Hartlepodilians had never really interacted with the Frenchmen at all. And during the war, propaganda and satirical cartoons were everywhere, depicting the French as these cretinous ape-like creatures with tails and claws. Bear with me because this part of the story is very much disputed as to actually what happened. So it's theorized by some who have chronicled the Hartlepool monkey story that the locals, due to their limited understanding of Frenchman anatomy, genuinely thought the monkey was an actual French soldier, or even worse, a French spy. According to legend, the townsfolk tried to get the monkey to speak, asking it various questions. Where is Napoleon? What are the French plans? Was an invasion imminent? But because it was a monkey, the thing just answered with screeches and chatters, which the townspeople apparently thought was the French language. The locals took in the would-be Frenchman as a prisoner of war and charged it with being an enemy spy for the French. And after being taken into custody, they held a trial, the result of which obviously found the monkey guilty of espionage on all counts. Afterwards, the townsfolk dragged the monkey into the town square and hung it from a crudely erected gallows. And the legend of the Hartlepool monkey hangers was born. Decades and even centuries pass, and the story of the famous monkey hanging spreads throughout Europe, resulting in the Hartlepool citizens getting their unscrupulous monkey hangers nickname. Even to this day, at rival football games, other teams can often be heard taunting the Hartlepool team with the phrase, "Who hung the monkey?" But the Hartlepodilians aren't all too ashamed of their alleged simian lynching past. As a matter of fact, in 1999, the Hartlepool United Football Club made their mascot a monkey that they call Hangus the Monkey. And their local rugby union team, the Hartlepool Rovers, are also colloquially known as the Monkey Hangers. In 2002, one of the mascots who wore the Hangus the Monkey suit ran for political office. His platform embraced the historical monkey hanging culture and promoted it as being important to the town's identity. He was later elected as mayor for the town. Mayor Stuart Drummond served for a total of 3 terms off the back of embracing the monkey hanging lore. Needless to say, the story of the monkey hangers has become integral to the identity of Hartlepool, but it must be stated that the degree of truth to the story is still up for debate. During the Napoleonic Wars, when the incident supposedly occurred, only a reported 14 ships sank in the Hartlepool Bay area. And according to records, none of them were French ships. So many simply consider it an apocryphal tale with no true confirmation of its authenticity. I want to believe, damn it. There are some historians that theorize that the monkey story might actually be a cover-up for something darker that actually occurred. During this time, small-statured boys ages 12 to 14 years old were in service to ships, as they were small enough to move expeditiously through the narrow spaces below decks, and they were designated to perform tasks such as priming the cannons with gunpowder. These boys were called powder monkeys. So it's possible that the people of Hartlepool just actually hung a fucking kid. Though we may never know the answer, most of the people of Hartlepool believe the story to be true. A quote from the mayor: "Of course it happened. It is too bizarre of a story to make up, so there must be an element of truth to it." Absolutely bulletproof logic, and shout out to the monkey hangers. The execution of Murderous Mary. Now we reach one of the more upsetting stories of the day. While not formally sentenced by a judge, this elephant was sentenced to death by the court of public opinion in a small town in Tennessee. This decision resulting in a macabre public spectacle that many believe has cursed the region up to the modern day. Mary the elephant was a 5-ton, 22-year-old Asian elephant that in 1916 performed and toured with the Sparks Brothers Circus. Now, the Sparks Brothers Circus, led by its owner Charles Sparks, was like the Temu version of circus menageries around at the time. It couldn't hold a candle to John Robinson's 4-ring circus, which was said to have traveled with 42 railroad carts worth of animals, or Barnum and Bailey's 84 animal carts. Sparks only had 10. But despite their lesser offerings, Sparks managed to get by with his assortment of supposedly educated sea lions, powdered dogs posing like Greek statues, circus clowns, and of course the imposing Mary the elephant, also known as Murderous Mary. Mary was billed as the largest living land animal on Earth. Mary was talented, said to have been able to play 25 songs using musical horns without missing a single note, and could even pitch and bat baseballs, a feat that astonished millions around the country. Aside from Mary's abilities, Sparks marketed her as dangerous. The circus claimed that Mary had killed upwards of 18 men. During those times, billing an animal as dangerous would draw huge numbers, as people would flock to see if the elephant was indeed as ferocious as described. Out of all of Sparks' menagerie, Mary was his cash cow. While it was all fun and spectacle on the surface, Sparks' operation had a dark underbelly, as many of the circuses of the time did. There was much in terms of abuse going on, as well as mistreatment towards animals. And when it came to hiring professionals, well, they were few and far between. Most animal handlers, circus workers, and staff were hired on carnies, homeless drifters who worked for cheap. Such was the case with Sparks' newest hire-on at the time of this story taking place, 36-year-old Walter Red Eldridge, a homeless janitor who joined the show as Mary's handler. Eldridge was described as, quote, a transient hotel clerk with a horse jockey's physique and so irritable that the smallest hindrances triggered bouts of hollering and flailing limbs, unquote. On September 11th, 1916, Eldridge was hired, and the man wouldn't make it 48 hours before being let go. Only he wasn't terminated, he was killed. The day after Eldridge was hired, the Sparks Circus was in Kingsport, Tennessee. Here, the unqualified homeless handler was chosen to lead the parade of animals riding atop of Mary through Kingsport, and that's when tragedy struck. What exactly happened is contested, but here are a few eyewitness accounts. One witness, a 19-year-old man named W.H. Coleman, claimed that after the Kingsport performance, Eldridge had ridden Mary to a pond where she could take some time to drink and splash around with the other elephants. He explains what happens next in the most eastern Tennessee way possible. Shout out to Wendigoon. There was a big ditch at that time, run up through Center Street, and they'd send these boys to ride the elephants. There was, 7 or 8 elephants, and they went down to water them. On the way back, each boy had a little stick-like that was a spear or a hook at the end of it. And this big old elephant reached over to get her watermelon rind, about half a watermelon somebody eat and just laid down there. And he did. The boy gave him a jerk. He pulled him away from him, and he just blowed real big. And when he did, he took him right around the waist and throwed him against the side of the drink stand, and he just knocked the whole side of it out. I guess it killed him. But when he hit the ground, the elephant just walked over and sat his foot on his head. Blood and brains and stuff just squirted all over the street. Another account from the September 13th, 1916 issue of the Johnson City Staff newspaper described that Mary, quote, coiled its trunk vice-like about Eldridge's body, lifted him 10 feet into the air, then dashed him with fury to the ground. And with the full force of her beastly fury, is said to have sunk her giant tusk entirely through his body. The animal then trampled the dying form of Eldridge as if seeking a murderous triumph. Then, with a sudden swing of her massive foot, hurled his body into the crowd. Whatever the case, Eldridge was dead and Mary was the culprit. After the killing, it was said many attendants had drawn weapons and opened fire on Mary. A blacksmith named Hinch Cox supposedly fired his .32-30 Winchester rifle 5 times at the beast, but Mary reportedly shrugged off the bullets. As a crowd formed at the killing scene, the outraged mob demanded Mary be dispatched on the spot. Around this time, the town's top lawman, Sheriff Gallahan, would shoot at Mary with his .45 revolver, and according to a witness, his shot only knocked chips out of her hide. The sheriff failed the on-the-spot execution. Now things would calm down a bit and Mary would be subdued and the frothing crowd dispersed. But Sparks now had blood on his hands. It was one thing to bill an elephant as dangerous, but if the elephant actually was dangerous and had killed someone, well, now it was a problem and hurt his bottom dollar. Mary went from his main attraction to a liability. In the time after the death of Eldridge, towns in Tennessee were refusing to allow his circus to perform, and the nearby Johnson City, where performances had already been scheduled, implemented a new tax ordinance restricting Carnival's operations within city limits. In the mind of Charlie Sparks, this thing was hurting his business and it had to be put down. And what he decides to do next, I must say, is reprehensibly cruel. On September 13, 1916, in Irwin, Tennessee, Mary was brought out for a scheduled performance, likely thinking she was about to perform tricks as usual. But something was off. She was chained up outside of the main circus tent, purportedly nervous, swaying as if she knew something was wrong. Folks at the show were initially dismayed that Mary wasn't doing tricks for them, but Mr. Sparks quelled their disappointment with a big announcement. Due to near unanimous public support, Mary was sentenced to death and scheduled to be publicly hung. It was scheduled for later in the afternoon at the nearby Clinchfield rail yards, and all were invited, free of charge, no price of admission, public execution of an elephant. A crowd of 2,500 people gathered to watch Mary be hung, and many witnesses would later give their recollection of the events. Quote, "They had a time getting the chain around her neck. Then they hooked the boom to the neck chain, and when they began to lift her up, I heard the bones and ligaments cracking in her foot. They finally discovered that she had not been released from the rail, so they did that. Reportedly, the chain ripped after she had been raised off the ground, and she'd hit the ground with a great thud and sit upright, breaking her hip. The crowd, though, had no idea she had broken her hip and saw her as a dangerous loose elephant, so they all panicked and rushed for cover. Workers then reattached a heavier chain and set up the winch for a second time, and on this go-round, the hanging was successful. Witnesses say they kept Mary hanging there for close to half an hour, and then dug a grave with a steam shovel about 400 feet up the tracks, where they then proceeded to dump her inside and bury her underneath. Many claim that a group of grave robbers descended upon her tomb later that night to dig her up and cut off her tusks to sell for money. But in the photo, it can be seen that Mary had no tusks at the time she was hung. It's also important to keep in mind that usually female Asian elephants don't have tusks. Mary's grim legacy would bring tourism to Irwin, but in time, many of the locals began to see the whole affair as a curse, as the town became stigmatized as the one full of imbeciles that hung an abused elephant, which rightfully lashed out against its cruel handlers. Though in modern years, the people of Irwin have fought back against the unscrupulous narrative. In 2016, on the 100th year anniversary of Mary's hanging, Irwin began a week-long annual event where they raised money and paid $9,000 to local artists to paint 8 fiberglass elephants that were later auctioned off, and all the proceeds went to an elephant sanctuary in Tennessee. To this day, locals have raised thousands of dollars to help elephants, and the fundraising continues. It also should be noted that the actual killing of Mr. Eldridge happened in Kingsport, Tennessee. They just did the hanging in Irwin, Tennessee. So cut him a little bit of slack. Maybe Kingsport actually needs the heat here. Mary's case is one of many from history that showcases the execution of a so-called murderous animal, a creature sentenced to death for perceived crimes against man. However, in this case, it was nothing more than an abused creature fighting back against its cruel tormentors. Mary wasn't a murderer, she was a victim. Alcoholic monkey sentenced to life behind bars. Next, we cover the case of the Indian monkey, who rather than being harshly executed for alleged crimes against humans, was sentenced to life in confinement. In 2017, in Mirzapur, India, Kalua, a 3-year-old pet monkey, went on a rampage. According to reports, Kalua had a bit of a drinking problem, and he was on stuff stronger than Irish coffee. This little guy was a full-blown alcoholic, a wily pet owned by a local witch doctor. The owner was said to have routinely provided liquor for the monkey and disturbingly fed the pet meals of minced monkey meat, making it a cannibal. In 2017, however, the occultist owner of this corrupted beast died, leaving the alcoholic monkey in the early stages of withdrawal. So then, Kalua took to the streets of Mirzapur, roaming neighborhoods in the area and lashing out at unsuspecting victims eager to find more booze. His rampage was violent, attacking a reported 250 pedestrians around the Mirzapur district in search of booze. The victims were mostly women and children. They were brutally assaulted, resulting in multiple instances of them needing plastic surgery to repair of bite marks and wounds that it had left. And not only did he maim multiple victims, he actually killed one as well. Kalua's violent outburst spurred a group of local trappers to respond. Kalua was able to elude them for quite some time, but eventually veterinarians and trappers caught up to him in the forests. Here they were able to subdue and capture him, dosing him with tranquilizers until he passed out, and they brought him to the Kamper Zoo. Over the next 3 years at the Kamper Zoo, Kalua remained hostile to everyone, especially female zookeepers and other monkeys. The zookeepers hoped to one day integrate the simian back into the wild, but that was simply not happening. He was too violent and reportedly had an insatiable appetite for meat, specifically monkey meat. He refused to eat vegetables, and zoologists believed his rage was partly due to his alcohol withdrawals as well as the cannibalistic diet he had purportedly been on since he was little. In many animals, resorting to cannibalism can cause rage and aggression. Therefore, Kalua needed to be isolated forever. He was just too dangerous. Quote, "We kept him in isolation for some months and then shifted him to a separate cage," said the zoo doctor. "There has been no change in his behavior and he remains as aggressive as he was. It has been 3 years since he was brought here, but now it has been decided that he will remain in captivity all his life." So in June of 2020, Indian authorities sentenced Kalua to life behind bars for his crimes against man. The monkey is to remain isolated for the rest of his life in human captivity. While obviously this isn't a formal court sentence, it was considered a matter of public safety to lock this monkey up, and a collective push from the community resulted in him getting a life sentence. The Parrot Murder Witness. Next, we explore a genuinely fascinating crossroads of animals and crime. That being animals who witness the crimes of human beings speaking up. While I must clarify that the animal involved in this story was never called as a formal witness in the actual courtroom, its testimony, if you will, had millions online carrying about a criminal case they otherwise never would have heard of.
Get your ass moving now! Fucking shut up and you fucking shit!
This story takes place back in 2015 in the Inslee Township of Sand Lake, Michigan. Martin and Glenna Durham are at the center of it, a rather troubled married couple who had been living together for close to 11 years. On the outside, the two seemed amicable towards one another, but behind the scenes, the relationship had turned bitter, the discontent mostly caused by financial strain. This pent-up discontent apparently came to a head on May 13th of 2015. When after a welfare check was called by a concerned neighbor, law enforcement discovered both Glenna and Martin in the home, and they had both been shot. Martin was found dead on the floor in his underwear. He'd been shot 5 times. Glenna was found with a gunshot wound to the head, but was miraculously still alive. The woman was rushed to the hospital and managed to survive her injuries. The immediate question from authorities: what the hell happened here? Well, turns out there was somebody or something inside of the house at the time of the apparent shooting that may have had the answer to that very question. This is Bud, an African gray parrot and pet of the deceased Martin Durham. Bud's birdcage was positioned in the living area of the home, near where the shooting occurred. As many of you are aware, parrots are renowned for their mimicry ability. Voices, beeps, bops, whatever sound you can think of, these guys can mimic it. And well, given what the parrot was saying, it soon became clear that Bud may have directly witnessed or heard the traumatizing scenario that led to his owner's death and Glenna's wounding. In the time following the death of its owner, Bud the parrot was relocated to the home of Christina Keller, Martin's ex-wife, who actually originally owned Bud with Martin before their divorce. Not long after being in Christina's possession again, Bud began making chilling sounds and mimicking what seemed to be a heated domestic altercation between a man and a woman. The phrase, "don't fucking shoot," is heard spoken by the parrot multiple times. Take a listen.
Get your ass moving now! Don't fucking shut up and you fucking shit!
Now, it's impossible to say for certain, but I'd be willing to bet that that parrot was mimicking the traumatizing final moments that led up to Martin's death. You know, the don't shoot and all, and the guy's dead from gunshot wounds. The parrot alternates from a higher voice to a deeper voice as it talks. Perhaps there was a fight between a certain man and woman that ended in deadly violence that he was mimicking. It's important to note that in the time since the shooting, Glenna had claimed that she didn't know who had shot her and her husband. insinuating that they had been the victims of some random crime of violence. Her claim would become rather sus in short time. Bud the Parrot's testimony isn't the only reason to be suspicious of Glenna. Investigators found no forced entry into the house, no signs of an outside person going in there, and the gun found at the scene was registered to Glenna. And considering her single gunshot wound to the head, they began to suspect her of perpetrating a botched murder-suicide. Glenna would be made the prime suspect and charged with open murder. Later, suicide notes were found authored by the woman, all but confirming her intent. Prosecutors quickly found themselves with an open and shut case, but many online thought otherwise and pushed for Bud the Parrot to be made a formal witness and appear in court for good measure. After all, it seemed he was the only living creature that had witnessed the alleged murder. Maybe the little guy would go in front of the jury and mimic out the words, "It's me, Glenna, and I'm about to shoot my husband, squawk." While it would be entertaining to have a parrot on the stand, what you guys need to realize is animals can't actually be used as witnesses in court for many reasons. Shocking, I know. But a parrot can't take an oath. It can't be cross-examined. It can't answer any questions for that matter. And it can't be made responsible for any false statements that it may squawk. If a judge out there allowed a parrot as a witness, you have more things than just a parrot to worry about. So okay, maybe we don't have him on the stand as a witness, but why not include his mimicry of the alleged murder scene as part of the prosecutor's evidence? While I do personally believe that the parrot does mimic what was heard the night of Martin's death, this evidence probably would have weakened the case against Glenna. What if the parrot was mimicking a previous altercation they had that didn't end deadly, or simply something that it overheard on TV? If you're going to bring in evidence, it needs to be bulletproof. It can't just be the hearsay of a dumb bird. No offense to Bud. Really, the only type of animal behavior you see used in court as evidence is canine dogs reacting to the presence of drugs. That's about the extent of what the court allows. So sadly, Bud was never admitted as a formal witness, but his snitching wasn't in vain, as the bird did help bring massive amounts of public attention to this case, and his owner would eventually get justice. On July 19th of 2017, Glenna Durham would be found guilty of a felony firearm charge and first-degree murder. She would be sentenced to serve life without parole. While it goes without saying that this is a very sad case, it does bring me some peace that Bud was able to, at least indirectly, assist in exposing what happened to his beloved owner, Martin. Long live Bud the Parrot. Oh, yeah, we made it to the end of the video. We've got a big wave of fog coming in here. I just want to thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought about this one down below in the comments section, and let me know who or what you want me to talk about next. I got a big trek to get back to society here. I'll see you guys later.